Well, since I haven't made a video in a long time, I thought I'd just put something out there, and so what this is going to be is just going to be a little bit of a rambling on some thoughts that I've had about the state of sort of the transgender debate in American politics between the left and the right. One thing I see is that it seems like the left and right are actually talking past each other when they're talking about transgenders and transgender issues. Particularly in all the clips you see online, people like Matt Walsh and other people, people on the left and right, debating whether a trans woman is a woman, whether a trans man is a man, and these kinds of questions. One of the biggest things that I see is that it seems like they're using a different meaning of the term definition. So like someone like Matt Walsh will ask, like, what does it mean to be a woman? Right? When he says that that word mean, he's asking for the definition. He's asking for like this specific definition, like the definition of water is, H2O or something like that. And so they always respond. The people on the left, they always respond to that question as, I can't tell you what it means to be a woman. Only a woman can tell you what it means to be a woman. That kind of thing. And to me, I don't see this being addressed a lot. It seems like that kind of response isn't really answering that kind of question. That kind of response seems much more in line with the idea that the word mean there, when you ask what it means to be a woman, is something more similar to when someone asks you like what it means to be an American, or what it means to be English, or what it means to be a Russian or a Mexican. So you could say, well, what it means to me to be an American is to love freedom, or what it means to be an American is to, have certain principles or whatever it is. And so it seems like that is the way that the people on the left are interpreting that question. Well, what does it mean to be a woman? Well, because, if you take that latter sense of the word mean, as in when you say what it means to be an American. Well, what it means to be an American, can be different for other people. Like what it means to them to be an American, what the ideal is that they aspire to when they consider themselves as an American, or something like that. But to make an analogy with that, what someone like Matt Walsh would be asking is not what it means to be an American in that sense. Like if he asked what it would mean to be an American, he would ask like, what is the definition of an American? Which would be something like some particular citizen under this federal jurisdiction in this land, or something like that. And so I think a lot of the times people on the left and right actually just talk past each other. They don't use the same terms univocally. They sort of equivocate between these terms. I think unintentionally. And so I think that is one roadblock between actual common ground between people on the left and people on the right, is that they aren't even actually using the same terms. And another reason why I come to this conclusion, other than the fact that that kind of left-wing response seems more appropriately fitting to the kind of question of like, the word mean in terms of what it would mean to be an American. Another reason I think that they're misinterpreting each other or talking past each other is because I just refuse to believe that someone on the left would actually like interpret that question as asking for the definition of woman, understanding what a definition is, and then giving that response. Because obviously, like the definition of something is what gives that thing, or it's what expresses the intelligible content of that thing to locate it as a determinate fixed thing that you can actually refer to. That gives sort of that is the basis for the meaning of some sort of term, and so if you're going to make a whole bunch of claims using a term about woman, saying, well, this person's a woman, this person's a woman, a woman is this, woman is that, and then you say, well, I can't actually give you the definition of a woman, then all of those propositions in which you use the term woman are just going to be vacuous, because if it lacks a definition, then it has no intelligible content. And if you use a term in a proposition with no intelligible content, then you don't have the proposition. The proposition is meaningless, because there's no subject to which there is a coordinate predicate that you can actually synthesize. So I just refuse to believe that people on the left are actually doing that. I really think that a lot of them are just misunderstanding the question when someone asks what it means to be a woman. And I just think that this needs to be brought to light so that this can be clarified by people on the left. and whether people on the right actually might agree with this. And but more importantly, that people on the left actually clarify that how they are actually interpreting the question. Because if they freely admit that they are interpreting the question not in the sense of what does it mean to be a woman in a similar way as to what it means to be an American, but if they admit that they are literally conceding that they cannot propose any sort of definition, which a definition is composed of a genus and specific difference, which constitutes a species, right? Like if that is what they are rejecting that they can provide, then the position just loses intelligibility, and at that point, I just become disinterested because I'm not interested in unintelligibility. I guess while I'm at it, I might as well bring up a few other things that kind of irk me about the transgender debate. It's specifically when people, usually on the left, bring up intersex people as a sort of talking point about transgender issues. Specifically when it is people on the left who like to make a distinction between gender and sex. So at that point, to bring up intersex people as a sort of supporting point for the sort of more mainstream left-wing transgender ideology is just it's just a red herring, because under the sort of contemporary left-wing ideology, sex and gender are distinct things. So to bring in intersex people is just it's not even wrong. It's just a category error. And that's just aside from the fact that this phenomena of transgenderism, vastly, in a vast majority, applies to people who aren't intersex in the first place. So again, it's just irrelevant. And speaking of the mutability of sex, a lot of people on the left will point to intersex and sort of sex mutability to show that sex is not a binary, and that there is this sort of fluidity, that people don't fit into these sort of neat categories and whatnot. But that is something that can be completely it can be completely conceded by the conservative, and it wouldn't hurt their position at all. Firstly, because to say that a fluidity of sex, which is exemplified in people who are intersex and whatnot, that don't, that we would say wouldn't fit neatly into these two categories, man and woman, male, female. The fact of that fluidity does not disprove the existence of a binary. That would be a sort of continuum fallacy, which would seek to disprove the existence of a binary in virtue of the variations between the binary. So to say that sex is a spectrum or gender is a spectrum, if they're the same thing, which they might not be, to say that's a spectrum does not invalidate the claim that it's a binary, because a spectrum, what a spectrum is precisely variation between 2 points, right? A spectrum is variation between between two binaries. Well, two binaries is redundant, but you get the point. When people on the left make this argument, what they're really thinking of isn't a binary, but they're thinking of a dichotomy, which is sort of a dichotomy is a strict, exclusive disjunction, either this or this. So black or non-black. Like there is no medium between those two. It's proposition and negation, the law of non-contradiction here. So that would be a true dichotomy, which is not the same as a binary. And the conservative does not have to hold that sex is a dichotomy, that sex consists of a true exclusive dichotomy. That's not something that they have to hold at all. And I guess something else I'd like to touch on before I close off this video is that the sort of transgenderism idea. A lot of things, when you don't realize it, they come down to the underlying natural philosophy and metaphysics. So really, a lot of the sort of left-wing transgender position, or the left-wing positions on transgenderism and transgender people and the transgender phenomenon, has a sort of bad underlying natural philosophy and metaphysics. So a lot of the proponents of these sort of left-wing ideas point out this idea of being born in the wrong body, or basically that, just being born, having a sort of man, being born in a man's body but really being a woman. But that kind of claim has a sort of philosophical and metaphysical underpinning to that, which kind of which kind of entails that in that case where it's sort of let's say a woman is born in a man's body, that sort of places a strong distinction between the person's intellect or the person's mind and the person's body, and that the person's intellect is naturally sort of engendered, and that the body is something that is really distinct and separate from the intellect, that is distinctly gendered. And so that you have this sort of gendered immaterial, or you have this sort of engendered self, which sort of embodies or encompasses this body, which is separately gendered. So you can have this sort of, if you want to think about it like some sort of soul or immaterial intellect, which is itself gendered in a feminine or woman in a female way, that is somehow emplaced in the wrong body. It's placed in a male body. And so you have this gendered sort of substance that is sort of somehow misplaced into this other gendered substance, because that's how you would derive the notion that it is a misplacement, that it is something being placed in the wrong body, that you are in the wrong body. Well, where do you get the wrongness from? Where does this idea of not having a proper proportionality come from? And it would seem to be this kind of underlying dualism, which is where the proper proportionality comes in, is that the sort of the gendered self, which is distinct from the body, is not properly proportional to the gender of the body. And so that's how you get this idea that I am really a woman, but I was born in a man's body. I'm in a wrong body because myself is something that's gendered and it's distinct from my body, which is gendered. So it is this strong kind of dualism, which I think is not only wrong in its own right and can be argued against very extensively, but there's also no telling what kind of ethical implications that these metaphysical underpinnings can entail. And I think we are seeing a lot of the consequences of that just unfolding today with how many people are regretting transitioning, and all of the mental problems that are associated with being transgender and with transitioning and whatnot. And I think that actually indicates the reverse of the position, which is their position is that something, let's say a man was born in the wrong body or a woman was born in the wrong body, and so the defect that is present there is a physical defect, right? It's a defect of the body. It's the wrong body. So the self that is distinct from the body is properly gendered. That is the gender which is essential to the true self, which is somehow disembodied, or not disembodied, but improperly embodied. And so the defect there is a physical defect. But I think it's actually the complete opposite. If we take a look at a sort of hylomorphic conception of the human person, where the human person is a composite of matter and form, the result of the composition of matter and form is, in this case, it's a living body. So what you are is a living body with a specific nature and properties that flow from that nature. And one of the properties that flow from the nature of the composite substance is sex, right? Because the essence of man is rational animal, and an animal is something that is intrinsically sexed. Now, the reason that there can be multiple sexes is because a part of the sexed nature of an animal is being indifferent to which sex it is, right? So sex isn't properly said to be something which is essential, but it does flow from the essence insofar as animality is essentially sexed. But again, like I said, is indifferent to which sex it is, and which is why we have different sexes. Now, if we have this hylomorphic model where we have a human being which is a unified substance, which is a living body, then the misapprehension of one's sex or gender, or the sort of dysphoria that comes along with reflecting on one's sex or gender, shows that what is happening is not a defect in the body, but it is rather a defect in the mind, insofar as the mind is not properly conforming itself to what the substance is. Or in other words, if a human being represents itself or sees itself as being other than what it is, then that simply means that the mind is not conformed to the proper image of the body. It's not conformed to the proper image of itself. And so it is literally, it's a literal disorder in the sense that the mind is not properly ordered to the being of the person. And so it is not a physical disorder insofar as the body is disordered in proportion to the mind, but it would be, in the technical sense, a mental disorder. And I know that term is very loaded, but I'm saying it in a very philosophical, technical sense, because the mind is not properly ordered to the being of the body, and is not properly conformed to it. Because to be a disorder is just to not be properly ordered. That's what disorder means. So dysfunction is improper function. It's to not properly function. And again, this goes back to the ethical implications of these metaphysical views. Whereas on the hylomorphic view, if we are a unified substance in which it is the case where gender dysphoria consists in the misconformity of the mind to the human person, to the human being, then what would help that person, the treatment for that negative feeling, that dysphoria, would be to help one psychologically properly conform themselves to the being that they actually are. And on the sort of strong, more dualistic view, which I talked about earlier, it wouldn't be that solution, because under that view, it would be a physical defect, as I said. And so the solution under that strong dualistic view would be to conform that body to what is to the mind, which is what is properly gendered. And that's exactly why you see transitioning. That's why transitioning is a thing, is because underlying the ideology is that the gender dysphoria consists in a physical defect. And so the way to solve that is to properly conform the physical to the mental. Whereas under a sort of hylomorphic view, which I think is obviously very defensible on its own, it would be the opposite. It would be to have the mind be properly conformed to the body, which is the substance of the being. And so that's just a very clear example where we can see possible ethical implications of these underlying metaphysical views. And so I think it is very important in transgender debates to not just talk about the science and the biology, which is basically what all contemporary political commentators do. They all just talk about this study and this science and that. Where I think it's really important to actually dig at this at a philosophical level, and to actually look at the natural philosophical and metaphysical underpinnings of these views and what they actually entail. And so I can't really think of anything else right now. So I guess that'll be the end of my rambling. I've probably said things that are very easily debunked because it's just off the top of my head, basically just rambling. So if you liked it, leave a like, subscribe. Let me know in the comments what you think, whether you disagree, whether you agree, whatever points that you think should be corrected or you think are good points. And thanks for listening to my ramble, and I'll see you in the next video.